In this Scots Way podcast, I talk to artists Oliver Cook and then Calum McClure about their exhibitions which are on at the Scottish Gallery in Edinburgh during September. Oliver is a sculptor who has created the most beautiful objects using alabaster, and Calum is a painter inspired by the urban landscape of Glasgow. Both give fascinating insights into their work and inspirations, and I hope you enjoy our conversations with them. Hello everyone, and welcome to another Scots Way podcast. And this time I'm joined by artist Oliver Cook to talk about his exhibition Form and Light, which is on at the Scottish Gallery from the 2nd to the 25th of September. Hi, Oliver.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. I'm really well. So it's interesting how I've been having a look at your work. How do you describe it to people like myself?
I think I describe it as very simple, I use just everyday objects as a starting point, just to see how they would look and feel if they were made using alabaster. So I think quite organic, soft, sort of curved pieces.
And the use of alabaster interested me because it's not something that you hear much of these days. Is that just that it's not used a lot, or is it something that it is, but people don't realize it?
I don't think it's a very common material. I hadn't come across it many times before I started using it. The few times that I had seen it had been in sort of museums. So I've seen a few exhibitions at museums where there'd be really, really old vases and things made from alabaster. So those were the sort of reference points I had before I started using it in my own work.
And the exhibition's called Form and Light. So for you, how do the two work together?
Yeah, I think because all the alabaster that I use is translucent alabaster, so it does have that that property of taking on light and being slightly translucent. And
it's, having read through about the exhibition, these are not just objects that are there to be viewed, they're there to be touched and interacted with, for want of a better word. Is that right?
Yeah, so I thought, so last year I made a piece that was a basket that had a handle. And I just thought it's quite an interesting concept of being able to move something around the house and being able to place it and change where it's laid around the home. And I often make pieces that I'd want to have in my own house. And so it's just, I just enjoyed the interaction, being able to carry it around.
And how do you I love the idea that your house is full of these beautiful objects. I think that's
not anymore, because they're all in Scotland.
They're all in Scotland, yeah. But how do you think that the interaction changes the object? Because it got me thinking about often when you buy a piece or you view a piece of sculpture in particular, you think of it as almost set in time and literally set in stone, but actually interaction changes it.
Yeah, I think being able to interact with it and move it and carry it around, there isn't a sort of permanence attached to it like there is if it was a painting that you might hang on the wall. There's a bit more of a relationship between you and the piece, perhaps, if you can move it around the house at various times of the year, or just pick it up whenever you like.
I was thinking about kind of extreme versions of how people interacting with sculptures changes them. And in Edinburgh, there's the statue of Greyfriars Bobby, the dog. and people have been rubbing its nose for luck for many, many years, and they've had to kind of say, stop doing this because you're going to take its nose off after a pace of time. But there is that kind of, if you have an object around the house for any length of time, they'll start to be maybe a little bit of damage, a little bit, and it will change the object.
Yeah, I think so. I think obviously you do have to be a little bit careful because it is quite a soft material.
Yeah.
It's not like strong colors and oils may impart onto the stone. But I think generally I'd rather enjoy things and them get a little bit bumped and scratched rather than never using anything and trying to keep it pristine. I'd rather they have a few marks on them, but they've been enjoyed for a long time.
Yeah, yeah. And also that's the form, if you like, but the other side of the equation is light, and light is constantly changing, constantly moving. So even if the object is in one place, it will change with light, as you say, especially since the material is translucent. So how do you, I mean, people go to the exhibition, can see for themselves, but then how do you choose to exhibit them? You must have a thought about how they're lit, how the space is lit, and all of those things.
Yeah. So in the room, there's two large windows. So I think I always see them in a home sort of setting. So placing them in a gallery, I think they look, it's really, really nice to see them in the gallery, and I think they look, it's such a beautiful space. But I think they always look more at home on a windowsill or somewhere like that you would actually have them around your house. And there's in the gallery there's like a fireplace, so one of the pieces is placed on the fireplace to sort of show how it might look at home.
That's interesting. Was that when you set out to make your work, is there always a sense that this is to be practical and not simply something to sit and be admired?
So certainly with some pieces, I think I have a few pieces within the exhibition that are more sculptural forms, the arches. They were sort of an expansion on the way we handle bowls that I've made, just because I really like the sort of arch within the bowl. But some pieces are designed, you could have maybe dried flowers or something in the vases. I've got two pieces that are hanging on the wall. I made some wooden hooks to hang these two bowls on the wall, which would be more of a permanent fixture, I guess. But yeah, some pieces, there's just such a tactile nature to the stone, and it's just obviously when you see a handle or something, you kind of inherently want to pick it up almost.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's like looking at them, the idea that it's not just that you want to use them, but you do want to pick them and feel them and kind of get the sense of them. Yeah. So here's a real non-artist question from someone, but how do you decide what it's going to be when you've got a block of stone there? Do you have the idea beforehand that this is going to be a bowl or a piece of sculpture or whatever it might be, or does that come while you're working on it?
When I first started doing it, I was just hacking away. The first vase I ever made, I really didn't have an idea of what I wanted to make. I had a rough idea of the vase, but I didn't have a clear idea of how I wanted it to look. I was just having a go using the material. But now, because there is such a high amount of wastage, you remove so much material to get to the final form, that I have started to plan how, because I buy the stone in slabs,
Right.
so I plan out each piece before I start working with it, just so I can kind of fit everything together, so I'm not wasting as much material. But and sometimes the form does change due to, there might be some cracks or some surface markings from the quarrying process, so that does impact the final shape. But I try to assess all the imperfections of the stone before I start working with it now, which is, it's a lot of trial and error. I don't think I'm doing things the most efficient way as possible, but I think it's just a large learning process.
And how does that process work? Are you saying you're getting the slabs from the quarry there they're almost individual each time, are they? They've all got their own little markings or things like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I buy all my stone from a stone yard down in Dorset, and it's hard to see. That you can see some veining on the outside. There is some areas that you can really see some quite pronounced markings, but you don't really see the finer details until you are almost at the polishing stage. So yeah, did you ask what the process was?
Yeah, sorry, yes, I did,
Yeah.
and then I went away. I suddenly had a thought about the stone itself, but yeah, absolutely. What is the process?
So once I've ironed out the final form, the shape I want to make, then it's just a gradual process of going through. I'll drill out the hollowing out of the vases and things. That's the most laborious process, because it's quite hard to hollow out material. So I'll use drills, die grinders, angle grinders, just to try and remove as much stock as possible. Then when I'm sort of approaching the point where I'll move on to rasps and files, then that's when I'll just do everything by hand, because it's really easy. It's quite a soft material. It's slightly softer than marble, but harder than soapstone.
Right.
So it is, you can always take more off, but you can't put more back on. So yeah, then it's just a really slow process of using rasps to gradually refine the shape, before moving on to sandpaper to polish it.
So when you were beginning to work in this way, if someone's a painter and something goes wrong on the canvas, then it's easier to get another canvas than it is perhaps to get a full new block and start working that way. Were there was it a frustrating learning process? Was there a lot of broken pieces that just couldn't, you had to start again?
I've only broken one. Because it's such a slow process, you've got to do something wrong or be doing something wrong for quite a long time before it really impacts the shape. So you can take a little bit off and then a little bit more. So I'm always measuring, checking. Sometimes I'll have 2 or 3 pieces on the go at the same time, and I'll maybe stop working on it for a little bit and then just kind of take in the shape, see where I want to go from there. Or sometimes I'll have just a lot of drawings. I'll take a lot of measurements, make a lot of drawings. I have the rough sort of silhouette. I recently bought some clay to try and model some of the asymmetric vase forms, because they are quite difficult to think of in your head. Certainly, I want to experiment more with a more sort of undulating surface pattern,
Right.
And that's really difficult to think of just in my head and translate from drawings. So I think in the future I'm going to maybe have example patterns that in clay that I can then use as a visual reference, so that I'm not practicing on the final product almost. Because it's quite an expensive material, and I don't want to waste any of it.
And so how did you get into sculpture? Was that something that you wanted to do from the beginning, or was it something that you've kind of found your way to?
It's something I've found my way to. I've always been interested in making things, all through school, outside of school, all throughout university. My dream job was always to be a furniture maker, and I'd made a stool a few months before I started working with stone. I tried casting things, metalwork. I used to make like carved spoons and things. So it was almost a natural progression to try using stone. Because I started using stone after I saw work by Isamu Noguchi and Hannah Eshel.
Right.
And I'd just been to an exhibition in Kettle's Yard in Cambridge with Jennifer Lee, and it had loads of her vases on display. And the two sort of coincided at the same time. And I had a look around, and there was a stone yard just about an hour away from Cambridge, in Yelvertoft. So I went over there and walked around this amazing stone yard with all different types. It had marble, various different types of alabaster, some that I've just not seen. There's the first vase I made was made out of rainbow alabaster, which is sort of grey, opaque with really pronounced veining. And that was a smaller piece. I bought a large piece of translucent, and then from there just continued working with the translucent alabaster. And yeah, it's just sort of gone from there, really.
It's interesting. It sounds like you always wanted to make things, but make things that were functional, that were, it was a stool.
Yeah, I love working with natural materials mainly. I've always been drawn more to wood, and metal, and I've never been that fond of working with plastic and those sorts of materials. So I always knew that I wanted to make furniture or do something like that.
I guess one of the things that happens is that you develop as an artist, and maybe what you've done, you've tried new things, but do you think you've found your kind of medium, for want of a better word, or your material? Maybe that's a better way of doing it. Or will you always experiment with different things and different styles?
I think with stone, I've definitely found my material. I do want to try other different types of stone as well. Marble's one that I'd quite like to work with in the future, but currently I'm just enjoying working with the property of the translucent alabaster and seeing what forms I can make with it that kind of work and coincide with the stone. But definitely in the future, I'd want to continue trying out different materials.
And at the moment, is everything concentrated on this exhibition in Edinburgh, or are you already thinking about what you might do next or what you might exhibit next?
Yeah, so I've been really focused on getting everything done for this exhibition. And in the future, there's a few different ideas that I want to work on later on this year. I really want to continue working with the asymmetric vase shapes, because I think with vases there's just so much potential for variation that I think I've made 5 or 6 vases so far. So there's a lot. I want to kind of look back at some of the forms that I think have worked really well, and maybe continue and experiment and push those further. and I made a vase with a lid sculpture, and I'd like to revisit that and continue working on those forms, I think, for the rest of the year.
Fantastic. Well, Oliver, thanks for taking the time to have a chat. It's been fascinating to talk to you.
No, thank you. It's been really fun.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest Scots Way podcast. And today I'm talking to artist Calum McClure about his latest exhibition on at the Scottish Gallery in Edinburgh from the 2nd to the 25th of September. Hello, Calum.
Hello, Alistair. How are you doing?
I'm well, thanks. So, first of all, can you say what the title is? Because I don't think I'll make a good job of it. What is the title?
No, my French is non-existent, so I'm probably not going to pronounce it very well. But Le Tiers Paysage, I think, is.
And what does that mean in translation?
That means the third landscape is the translation, and it's kind of a concept that I was painting before I came across the term. So it's suburbs, it is landscape, but it's not maybe a traditional idea of landscape. And this, the title being in French, is from an idea of a landscape architect, right, a French landscape architect, and it's his term, so that's why I used it.
Well, that makes sense now. I mean, having seen your work, that's absolutely the kind of third landscape. Before we go into detail, how do you describe your work to people when they ask, what you're working on?
It is always quite difficult because I maybe don't like being pigeonholed as a landscape artist, because people maybe have a bit of a pejorative, idea of very pretty landscapes, and not that there's anything wrong with that. But yeah, I like to. So it's difficult to describe, actually. I usually just describe quite plainly what the pictures are themselves. If it is a view overlooking a train track, as there are in this show, or a botanical garden that have been in shows previously. But I don't know, I've not really come up with a quick way to describe anything.
Catch-all term. Well,
exactly.
It's interesting because it is, they are urban landscapes, particularly of Glasgow, which really is of interest to me, because these are streets that I walk as well, and particularly the last year walked them quite a lot. But a lot of the imagery, it's kind of where nature is almost meeting man-made, isn't it? It's that kind of thing where
exactly, yeah. So this is the concept that Gilles Clément, the French landscape architect, came up with for these parts of the city where nature it comes into the city. It might be embankments, it may be next to train tracks, but it isn't a garden, and it isn't a wilderness either, and nor is it farmland, which is obviously used for humans use it because we need to eat. It's these other places, maybe forgotten spots next to rivers, for instance, and there are all different parts.
Glasgow is I presume all cities are great for that, but cities that we know, City of Glasgow is great for that, because I used to live in the city centre, and sometimes you go for a walk and you discover something like an old underground station, near the Glasgow Green, or you would walk down the side of the Clyde, heading out east, and nature's almost not just fought back, it's taken over, it's become the prominent side of things.
Yeah, definitely. It's that thing, and especially here in the south side, there are all the post-industrial landscapes, some of which are yet to be built on, some of which are being developed. So it's where all these things kind of meet that I'm interested in. And it's the places that you may walk past and not think very much of, because they're not designated as anything in particular. They can be quite innocuous, if you like, spaces, but nonetheless, of course, with the post-industrial ones, with their own history and they're kind of full of potential, and but I also quite like them as they are. So
no, absolutely, and I think so it's clear that you're finding beauty in places that a lot of people would just walk by and never maybe think twice about. When did you start looking at your city and perhaps further the world like that?
So the idea for the show to be roughly based on suburbs was something pre-COVID, but I mean, being here, it kind of intensified that. Going for walks daily, and that my walk from here in the south side up to my studio in the Barras, along the suburban railways, along, as you say, the Clyde. That and being around the subject as well constantly was something that I've never really done before. Usually I'll go to various sites and I'll take photographs, I'll sketch a little bit, and then I'll go back to the studio and I'll make an exhibition from it. But this thing of constantly being around the subject daily was something quite different this time round.
And you would see it, I presume, change over the seasons. If you were doing that over the period of time that we've been locked down and going, walking here, there, and everywhere, then there's been huge changes there as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and it can look these places can look very overgrown, and in the summer when it's everything's green and it's very full, and then in the winter when everything dies back. And also, you notice what we do to these places, especially next to the railway, when people, for instance, in Strathbungo just now, there's a couple of those lines which have had maintenance work done. I mean, you don't know, some people might not notice that type of thing, but when you're when you're there photographing it every day,
No, that's right. That's very true. And I suppose when you start looking with the artist's eye, for want of a better word, then these things do start to kind of maybe jump out at you. But I do think as well, everyone will have interacted more locally recently than perhaps at any other time. So they will see, they'll maybe start to go to parks, but it's almost the spaces between the parks that are the interested one. It's not the areas which are kept and tended and all that stuff. It's the little side paths, what was the term? Somebody I know did, they would look at, it's the geography of a city that people make rather than that's built originally, so people take a shortcut and that wears things away and all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's, these, as you say, the paths through places, if there's an angle, people will cut it. And
So what's the process for you? You mentioned taking pictures and sketching. As you're on your walks, are you looking for something that just jumps out at you?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite haphazard. Some days I do go out with my bigger camera, and I'll be purposefully going out to photograph and to look. Other times I'll just photograph using my iPhone. It doesn't have to be a high quality image that I end up painting from. It's like that. And then I'll print those out, go back to the studio, and sometimes I like to lay all the photographs out, say 20 or so photographs on the floor, and have a think about where I want to start. You'll see in the exhibition there's quite a variety of technique. There's some that are much more representational, there's some that are more abstract, and that process of looking at all the images I have, then I start to maybe decide this one would be better expressed in a more abstract way. This in a more kind of literal and a more realistic style, let's say.
Yeah, because there are some that I looked through, I went, oh, I wonder if I've been there, or I wonder, you know, that kind of thing. So, but there are others, as you say, they're kind of abstract and almost dreamlike, almost like you don't expect them from an urban landscape. You know, there's more trees perhaps than you might expect. Now, of course, this is full of trees, as we know, but there's something about them that you're maybe not expecting when you hear the term urban landscape. Yeah, no, I guess I'm still drawn to the natural, to trees, to so yeah, I do still gravitate to that, although they are urban trees, if you like. Yeah. Do you have favorite parts of the city? I'm thinking that, you know, in your description, it's like the edges of the urban landscape. I took that not to mean the actual edges of the urban landscape, but, you know, where, you know, other urban, it's been fought against, if you like, with nature. Is that a kind of good way of thinking? Yeah, I think when you start to look deeper, you do see that it's not just, you know, it's not just trees. There's also the birds. I remember one time next to the Clyde, I don't know what type of butterfly it was, but there was, you know, thousands of. I should have got more photographs of that actually. So it's all these things as well. It's not just a kind of superficial nature. It really is, things live in there, you know. Yeah. I was thinking about, I don't know if you saw it, there was a little brief footage during the first lockdown of a deer that made it onto Buchanan Street. Right. Yeah. And was wandering about, and you see, if there are no people, nature will find a way of coming back. Yeah, of course. I mean, I guess the classics, you know, foxes that I remember when I was living over in Govan Hill and going to play football on a Wednesday night, I would always see this fox, or usually see coming back from playing football, you know, and it's just these things are there, and part of the city. You've reminded me actually, when I lived in High Street in Glasgow, I used to work in restaurants. I was up really early, and there was one time a fox was coming down right down the middle of High Street, absolutely gallus. You know, you could almost see the shoulders going like, this time of night, I'm in charge of here. And I think that's right. It's great to see that that's the case. Yeah, no, and they really, as you say, they don't mind you that you're there. They're just going about their business, kind of thing. Yeah. So when it comes to putting on an exhibition like this, do you work with the exhibition in mind, or do you then have to kind of have a lot to choose from and pick things out? What's the kind of practicalities of it? So usually, I'll work with the exhibition in mind. There are a few outliers in the exhibition, so there's some work from when I've been in Italy and also some of Greece, but they, as I say, they're kind of outliers that I've chosen to pull in to the exhibition. But usually, each thing that I'm working on, I know will form part. There's not much left out at the end. Most pieces in it. And this, you mentioned at the beginning that you know, when people say, "Oh, you're a landscape painter," they've maybe got the ideas of rolling hills and, you know, stags and all that kind of stuff. But I think that people are looking at the urban landscape increasingly. There's more of people like yourself that are deciding to perhaps paint what was usually thought of as ugly, for want of a better term. Yeah, perhaps. Although, I mean, the last show at the Scottish Gallery was Joan Airdley, and you know, she painted, figures, but also, you know, parts of Glasgow, and I guess there's always been limited amounts of people being inspired by the urban landscape. Yeah, that's true.
in Scottish painting, but it's not maybe what comes first to mind. It's maybe more, fishing villages or Highland kind of landscapes.
I guess what a lot of people, when they think of Glasgow artists who paint Glasgow, it's more figurative. That's the beginning. I mean, they might be set in Glasgow and stuff, but that's, whereas I think it's all landscape with you, isn't there? There's no people.
No, there's one, I'll get this right, there's maybe one where there's just figures are hinted at in one of the paintings, but there's no obvious, figurative work in the show.
And you're right, Joan Airdley's exhibition kind of showed both, didn't it? It showed kind of the urban stuff and also latterly the stuff up the east coast of Scotland.
Exactly, yeah.
So I was noting that when I was looking through your biography that you won the Joe Lomo Award, Painting Award back in 2011. And I was thinking, do such awards in the art world really make a difference? I know they do in books and in music, and is it the same type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of money to win at that time. So it really let me, focus more on my practice. And I guess with it came a bit of attention, press-wise and others. But yeah, I mean, it was a big thing to win then. And as I say, just that focus on your work is huge, and I think was hugely helpful at that period of time for me.
It's interesting because it's not something in terms of painters I think I'd thought about before, but I guess of course if there's an award that goes with it.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. I mean, it's a struggle at this, particularly at the beginning. I think at that point, I'm trying to remember if I was still working in kitchens and stuff in Edinburgh, so I was painting on like my split shifts and stuff. So yeah.
The amount of artists I've worked with in kitchens, it seems that's the natural habitat of the painter and sculptor, I think, is in there. It's interesting.
Yeah.
So is all your concentration focused on the exhibition, or have you thought about what you might do next?
So I have another exhibition with a gallery down south, Candida Stevens Gallery, and that one will be more focused on trees in particular, and particularly botanical specimens. This idea of planting and people bringing back botanical specimens to Britain and to Scotland more particularly. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds fascinating.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Well, Calum,
sorry.
No, just I'm looking forward to getting, I know to mention the Glasgow Print Studio as well, because only 6 of the works are made there. Usually printmaking's a big part of my practice, and just because of COVID, we've not been able to get in there much, but looking forward to getting back in there, because it's a huge, social part of my artistic career. So yeah.
That's something I hadn't even thought about, because I guess non-artists like myself, we think of it mainly as being a solo, lonely, you and a canvas, or you and whatever it is you're working on.
And it is that.
I'm sure.
A lot of the time, yeah.
But the Glasgow Print Studio and that whole area, which is a home for so many artists, there is that community feel, isn't it? And that would have been wiped away.
Yeah, exactly. So it's good that that's starting again, and there's exactly that community is coming together again, which is good.
Yeah, fantastic. Calum, thanks so much for taking time to get that. And we'll be back soon with someone completely different.